Well, it's kind of I guess in some respects, a classic story. When I was in high school, I learned how to scuba dive, and this is the Jacques Cousteau, Lloyd Bridges sea hunt era. And taking high school biology, I learned how to scuba dive, and I wanted to do marine biology. Then as an undergraduate, I took every invertebrate zoo course there was, and then I took a course in vertebrate biology and realized that vertebrates were really cool, and extreme environments were really cool. And so I got interested in desert animals and desert rodents, but I still wanted to do I wanted to do marine research, and that led me to marine mammals. So studying extreme animals in the marine environment, and a marine mammal it's kind of like a desert because there's an ocean that you can or cannot drink the water. It's extremely cold if you go to the Antarctic, and food's very difficult to get, and you're holding your breath. So it was really that sort of backdoor way I got into it, by trying to understand how animals work in extreme environments and wanting to do it in a marine environment. Well, it's interesting. I guess as a senior, I took Aquatic Mammals by Dan Odell, and Ken Norris was actually on the faculty at UCLA, and he was on leave, and Dan was one of those graduate students that was just finishing up, had finished and stayed on to teach a course. And so he taught the marine mammals course at UCLA where I was an undergraduate, and he talked about animals that don't, whether sea lions or seals could drink seawater, and that really piqued my interest because I'd been interested in desert rodents and water balance. And I just sort of started down that road, and then looking around at places you could do graduate work. There weren't really very many places, and UC Santa Cruz with Ken Norris was one of the premier places to be. So I came up to talk to Ken, and actually he had been a faculty member at UCLA, so a lot of my people I worked with knew him, and I met him at UCLA, then came up here and talked to him. And he sort of said, well, that's an interesting question. They've had problems transporting sea otters around. And so he sort of piqued my interest that sea otters might be an interesting animal to work with. And I went off and studied everything I could find out about sea otters, which actually didn't take me very long. Back in the mid-'70s, there's probably 20 papers published on sea otters, compared to today where there's, I don't know, how many thousand papers on sea otters. So I spent a day in the library using we didn't have computer searches back then, but literally a day in the library, a couple hours Xerox machine, I had every paper had been published on sea otters, and started asking questions about thermoregulation and how, sort of basic understanding of sea otter physiology. And that's what I did for my doctoral work, and that got me interested in food intake and then foraging behavior, because sea otters are one of the best animals to study foraging. And from there I went and did a postdoc with Jerry Koyman at Scripps in San Diego, and we studied the effects of oil on sea otters, which not surprisingly wasn't good, but we were able to use that sort of applied research funding to answer some very interesting questions about basic thermoregulatory biology of sea otters. And while in Jerry's lab, I got really exposed to diving physiology, and we started asking questions about how animals forage, how deep they dive, what enables them to do that, what's the physiological background, and then also taking it into understanding of the ecology. So what is it about where they feed and how they feed? And that theme's pretty much kept with me, is how animals work and where they go, how they find their food, how much do they eat, and what adaptations do they have to finding their food. And a lot of technology's been really important, and I guess I'm kind of fortunate over my career. The technology has just gone, tremendous changes. The first time depth recorder used film and would last all of 2 weeks, and that was developed in Jerry's lab while I was a postdoc. So I was there at the launch of the first time depth recorder. And now we have these little tiny recorders that can measure all kinds of things: temperature, pressure, GPS tags, and what we're finding out about animals today is absolutely astounding. So it's been an interesting journey, and I look back at sort of being, one of the new kids on the block when the technology and the ability to ask these questions and answer them was just being developed.